This Holy Week, Filipino Catholics are out visiting churches. Now, how do we prevent heat exhaustion and dehydration? And to give us some tips, we have here Dr. Vince Moderes, and he is the chairman of the Department of Emergency Medicine of the Rizal Medical Center. Well, good morning, doctor, and thank you so much for joining me here on New Day. Now, first question would be, we know Filipinos, diba? We have the yearly tradition of Filipino Catholics to participate in Holy Week activities. So the most common would be, the Visita Iglesia. So what would you suggest to families visiting churches, especially, pag extreme heat? Ano ba yung mga time of day?
Okay, so first and foremost, a lot of these families try to visit churches, whenever there's sunlight. So we strongly advise them to avoid specific times of the day, like lunchtime or around 10 to 2 p.m. because those are the times that the sun is very hot. So we also usually advise also them to have clothing that are light, cotton-based maybe, to be advisable, and also to bring water. Hydration is very important in these times of days.
Okay, how about yung mga also mga processions? We find them a lot at these times of Holy Week, and the flagellations and the...
Well, it's not really advised to undergo these types of activities, but if ever they will push through with it, it is strongly advised that they make sure that the things that they use, to cause a little bit of injury to themselves is sterilized because it might cause infection. Also, is also advised again to maintain hydration, also to provide water for these types of people who are undergoing this procession.
When you say hydration, we hear that a lot, but we don't know how much hydration is needed and how little. Can we overdo hydration? I mean,
there's no specific amount of water needed. It depends on the activity that you're doing. So a patient who is generally getting exposed to sunlight would definitely need more water than a person not exposed to sunlight. So basically, a person drinking around 1 to 2 liters per day and is exposed to certain heat must drink more than that. So with these types of time of the day, with summer heat, and they walk under the sun, it is best for them to keep hydrated, get a glass of water every 1 to 2 hours, and make sure that they are not always exposed under the sun.
And they also say that once you feel thirsty or dehydrated, parang huli na. Parang you should have been hydrating yourself prior to that.
Yes, that is a good advice for a person who's going to undergo this procession. So aside from bringing water, I guess you should hydrate yourself prior to it and make sure that you don't, if possible, not finish the whole procession, because if patient is exposed to prolonged heat, he might get heat-related illnesses.
Okay, so heat-related illnesses, what are they? Like we have the heat strokes or the
heat
cramps,
exhaustion.
heat exhaustion.
So the most basic things are the heat rash. It's like the pimple-like lesions on the skin that occur whenever you are exposed to extreme heat. Now, the second would be persons who have heat exhaustion. These patients who have been exposed to prolonged times of the day under the sun, they develop dizziness, they vomit, they're nauseous, they have a rapid pulse. Now, heat stroke is the most extreme type of heat-related illness, where you have dementation or they lose consciousness. So for these patients, it is a medical emergency.
So what do we do if we're in this procession and something happens? What's the first aid?
First aid would be to bring the patient out of the sun. Okay. And then
this is for mga heat strokes or even for the heat exhaustion?
Heat exhaustion is the same. You have to remove the patient from the under the sun and make sure that you cool them down and make use of wet cloth. But if the patient is unconscious, don't let them drink or don't force water because they might aspirate, and that causes respiratory problems.
So if the patient has fainted, no water, how about kung yung mga heat exhaustion lang, tapos nagsusuka?
Well, if they're conscious enough and they are able to drink water properly and are not aspirating, then you could introduce water slowly. But make sure that you also cool down the body by applying wet cloths.
Okay, so smelling salts. I mean, we see that a lot when people pass out. They have...
Well, it's not going to be a recommendation because the problem is the heat itself. So smelling salt would not be a very good advice for a patient.
Okay, so basically just get them out of the heat and just wet them down and wait for them to come to, and while we're also waiting for the medics to come along and help them, bring fans, umbrellas.
That's advisable. So whenever you're going to go walk in a procession, making use of an umbrella is a good advice.
So any other reminders to Catholic faithful this Holy Week? And we know they're going to be busy because this is such a big part of our culture.
Yeah, so again, make sure that you are well hydrated prior to the procession. Make sure that you have proper proper clothing, avoid heavy clothing, just wear cotton-based clothing, and then bring your umbrella. And don't forget to bring your water also.
Okay, and during all those flagellations, of course, just make sure that all of the things that
are
you'll be using
sterilized.
would be sterilized.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for shedding so much light in that, and I know it's going to be useful to a lot of our televiewers this Holy Week. So that's Dr. Vince Moderes of the Rizal Medical Center with us this morning.
Thank you.